Today we're doing a series of what we call around here the 5 B's. It's what is our church's business? What are the big pieces that we're about? The first one we are about is the word broken. We exist for broken people. There are all kinds of people in our world that have all different kinds of brokenness. For some it's a broken marriage. For some it's broken health. For some it's broken kids. Or broken relationships. Or broken business. Or broken work. Broken health, all kinds of things that you never imagined would happen to you, and it happens. And they're looking for something. And that's usually about the time that they come to church. And then through that process, there's another kind of brokenness that all of us needs to experience. And that's a brokenness regarding our sin, or that we have wrapped our life around ourselves and what matters most to us. And God is out on the periphery, and people are generally out on the periphery, but what's at core is me. That needs to be broken. It's that thing that keeps messing me up. The second B is beloved. That no matter how self-centered I am and how broken I am, that I am beloved trumps brokenness. People say, well, I know God can forgive me, but I can't seem to forgive myself. You've really got that backwards. The most amazing thing is that God forgives us. And it trumps whatever you've done. However bad you think it is, and God could forgive others. I can say I could forgive you, Seth, or Mindy, or other people, but I don't see how He can forgive me. That's not an understanding of what beloved is. Beloved trumps any sin. Now, I think that part of the reason why we think that we have such a hard time believing that is because our pride is so strong. We want to believe that somehow I should have known better, I could have done better. And because I should have known better and could have done better and didn't, that's sort of in that realm where God can't forgive. That's not true. Or sometimes because we don't feel love, then we think that that's our measuring stick. Then we assume that God must love me. He can love others, but not love me. We are beloved, not because we feel that way, or because life is so great, or because of any reason other than it is a fact. The cross tells me that. And because that is a fact and it is true, I'm staking my life on that. That's ground I can stand on. That trumps everything that I've done in my past. Now we come to the third B, which is the word building. Building. One of my favorite quotes from all of history comes from Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister of England when World War II broke out, and London went through what's called the Battle of London for months. They were bombed every night by the German Luftwaffe. And the city was just rubble everywhere, and the people were in air raid shelters. It looked very tenuous, and Churchill was criticized not just by people outside of the nation, but by his own people. Things he should have done and didn't do, and he did do, and why did he do that, and which is sort of how being a politician is. His favorite quote, though, or my favorite quote from him is this one: "Success is moving from one failure to the next with unbridled enthusiasm." There's a lot of truth in that statement. Proverbs 24:16 says, "For a righteous man falls down 7 times, gets up, but the wicked are overthrown by calamity." Building something is not a matter of I'm on the road and I'm just doing swell building this thing. No, building involves I keep falling down. I keep messing up. Disappointments come my way. Hurdles. Things that I just thought never would have to deal with. And in spite of discouragements and in spite of feeling depressed and looking at the circumstances and go, "Where are you, God?" Building, an attitude of building is, I'm going to do what I can do today. And it really doesn't matter what my circumstances say or what my emotions say or what my parents say or what my spouse says or my teenagers tell me. I'm going to build something today. What can I do to build my marriage with that lady right there? It can be just the littlest of things. And I'll do a load of laundry or dishes. Or I'm going to thank her for something. I'm going to build something today. A marriage is something that doesn't just happen. We're married. It's great. And suddenly we have a successful marriage. No, you have an infant marriage. And that has to be built. Every day you're building something towards that. With work, I want the boss to appreciate me. Well, he will, maybe, after 2 or 3 or 4 years of faithful service. You have to build something. I want the people in my life to trust me. Why don't they trust me? Trust is something you build. It's not your intentions that matter. It's not your words that matter. It's action. What am I going to do today to build trust? And tomorrow, what can I do today to build trust? Character and reputation is something that is built over a long period of time. What can I do today to build character in my life? That's the concept of building. Now, we've been looking at the life of Joseph to illustrate this. And as we do, there are 5 things that I would like to bring out of this story today that relate to this concept of building. Number 1, building is getting back up again and again and again. Getting back up again and again and again. When I was a kid, I discovered model airplanes. And I love model airplanes. Any of you guys make model airplanes or ships or any of that stuff? You get the kit, few ladies. You get the kit and you break off all the pieces and you pull out the instructions. And it's pretty detailed. It's putting all the little things together, the pieces, and gluing them together and holding it until that glue is fixed. Then when you got that done, you really only half done because now you had to paint the thing. And it usually came with paint, and you had your brush, and you had to paint all the different things that it said. That was quite a project for, a young teenager. The other kind of model airplane I built was a balsa wood glider. Now, that took about all of 10 seconds to build. Open the plastic package. There are 4 pieces. The fuselage, the front wing, the back wing, and the tail. And you throw that thing, and after you've thrown it about 5 times, it breaks. And you're done with that balsa plane. But a model airplane, when you get done with that thing, it's there. That is, unless you have a little brother, which I did. Now, I had model planes that I made, and I had them on my bookshelf. I discovered that was within reach of my little brother. And my little brother at that age liked to take my model planes and fly them, pretend he was, in battle somewhere, and he would land the plane, but he had no idea what he had in his hand, and so usually the wheels would fall off. The propeller would fall off. And then he would sort of get the idea of this thing is crashing, and so he'd do this nosedive. Mother, what are we going to do with my little brother? Yeah, I just had to build more planes. And my mother, to her credit, hung them from the ceiling with string out of the reach of my brother. In microcosm, that's life. Building. You have to build something. Let's look at the life of the life of Joseph. He's in prison. He's with 2 prisoners. He's there not because of what he had done. He's there unjustly. The chief cupbearer, one of the prisoners with him, told this dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream there was a vine before me. On the vine there were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." Now, he's had this dream, but he's puzzled by this. It seems to him like there's something of significance here, but he can't figure out what it is. And so he's asking Joseph about this. Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as formerly when you were his cupbearer. Only remember me," Joseph said, "when it is well with you, And please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house, which was Pharaoh's prison. 15, for I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that should put me into the pit. Now, think about what's happened to him. He's lost his father. His brothers threw him down a well and sold him into slavery. He's lost his family. He's lost his farm. He's probably lost his future, we would think. Lost opportunity of fortune. He's lost his freedom. This guy has lost virtually everything important there is to lose. Now, if that was you, what would be your attitude? What would you be thinking about God or about life? Well, God answers other people's prayers, but I guess He's not going to answer mine. I must have done something wrong to be in this particular place here. As I mentioned last week, I'm really good at moping. I can do it with the best of them. I think I would have been just moping, just sort of waking up and having my meals and just sort of, here I am, and there's nothing I can do about this. This is not his attitude at all, as we saw last week. I think, in short, our attitude would have been what you hear teenagers say when you try to give them the right perspective on something. Whatever! Now, it's not that we would say that to God, but can you hear that cry coming out of your heart sometimes? Whatever. Whatever. That's not the attitude that he has. This is a guy that keeps getting up when he falls down, and he keeps getting up when he falls down, and he keeps getting up when somebody else knocks him down. This is a man that's engaged with God. The second thing that strikes about this story is building involves overcoming repeated disappointments. This is a guy whose outward life seems to go from worse to far worse to the worsest. It's going in the wrong direction, we would say, or we would think. He says at the end of his little interpretation to the cupbearer, only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of the house. Now, if you were him, if I was him, I would have thought, hey, this could be my door. This might be the way that gets me out of here. Cupbearer, as far as I can tell, is going to be out of here. Back in Pharaoh's, around him every day, at least 3 times a day, with wine. He's going to have Pharaoh's ear. This is it. My opportunity. Verse 20. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer. 3 days later, the cells down in the pit open up. The guard says to the cupbearer, hey, Pharaoh wants to see you. If you were Joseph, what are you thinking? Hey, that dream really did come true. God is on the move. He's going to get me out of here. Probably what we'd think. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Right back there on the throne, right next to Pharaoh. He's got Pharaoh's ear. But Pharaoh hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to him. There's another fellow down there, a prisoner. He has a dream, and the other guy's thinking, wow, hey, I had a dream too. And maybe I'll have the really good kind of interpretation he had. He had the opposite interpretation. He's at the end of the noose. Now, if the cupbearer is in the throne room with the Pharaoh, what's the next thing you would think what's going to happen? Well, the very next verse that Moses pens is 41:1. After 2 whole years, 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed he was standing by the Nile. Nothing happened for 2 years. Cupbearer forgot all about Joseph. Even though he's with the Pharaoh, at least 3 times a day. Now put yourself back in prison. This guy you helped and encouraged is right there in Pharaoh's room, every day, at least 3 times a day, and says nothing. And there you languish in prison. It'd be hard to take, wouldn't it? How do you process something like that? How do you think about that? How do you wrap your head around that? How are we to think about things like that? Pharaoh has a dream, and this is a very puzzling dream to him. Nobody can interpret it, and suddenly the cupbearer awakens. Verse 9, the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today. He goes, oh, dang, I should have written it. I should have written down a Post-it note. I should have put it in my iPhone as a reminder. He suddenly remembers. He says, I've got a guy that can interpret dreams. He's really good at this. He interpreted my dream and the baker's dream. And they both came true. Pharaoh says, call him. Verse 14, Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. Now, it's easy sort of for us to think about this as we're sitting at home, or we're sitting here at church, and suddenly somebody important wants to see you, and you've been so discouraged and in the pit. Would you be ready to go? Do you have a good attitude towards God and towards interpreting a dream for somebody else? I think for most of us, we wouldn't. We could do okay, I'm going to shave, and I'm going to change clothes, but I'm still pretty grumpy. I'm still pretty depressed. I'm still pretty mopey. Now, what allowed Joseph not to be that way? I think partly because he was a man who understood the concept of building. Every day is important, no matter what my station in life is, whether my circumstances are great or whether they're the pits. And his was the pits. It's important. And all I have in front of me is the life today. And what can I build today? What can I do? Or with the people around me, how can I be a blessing to them? And at the end of the day, I've done the best I could to build something. And when he wakes up the next morning, I'm a builder. God is here. He wants to use my life no matter where I am. This is what allowed him to persevere and to overcome several huge disappointments. The third thing in building is you have to engage opportunity. You cannot assume a passive approach to life. There are a lot of things I can't do, but there are some things I can do. What can I do today? Verse 15, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I've had a dream. There's no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Now notice his response. Joseph answered Pharaoh, it's not in me. Now, if I was him, I would have said, hey, you got the right guy. I can do this. In other words, I would want to sort of ingratiate myself with Pharaoh, get on his good side so that I might be able to chance to tell him about my story and how I've been unjustly put in his place. But he doesn't ingratiate himself. He says, not me. But God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Now think about this. He's been in prison in the pit for several years. And he's asked this question about interpreting a dream. And you might say he's giving the Sunday school answer. But he hadn't been in Sunday school. He's not been in seminary. Yeah, I know, God can do the dream. Thanks, Prof. He's not been in a Bible study. It's Friday at 9 o'clock p.m. and you're wrapping up your Bible study and you said, yeah, God can interpret the dream. Now can we go have cheesecake and coffee? This guy has been through the fire. This guy has been through the dark night of the soul. And yet, he is shining the light on God, not himself, even at this moment of what looks like opportunity. God will give the answer. Verse 25. Joseph said to Pharaoh, after Pharaoh had given the 2 dreams, the dreams of Pharaoh really are one dream. 2 dreams, same thing. The 7 good revealed to Pharaoh what God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years. The 7 good ears of corn are 7 years. The dreams are one. They're the same. The 7 lean and ugly cows that come up after them are 7 years. The 7 empty ears of corn, blighted by the east wind, are also 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. I would want to, at this point, I think, say, and by the way, while I have your attention, have you seen my resume? There are a lot of good things I could do. It could be of help. Or, Pharaoh, I have some unjust things that have happened to me. Do you know a guy by the name of Potiphar? Do you remember what happened with his wife a few years ago? Let me tell you about my brothers and what happened to me. This whole thing is unjust, but you could undo it. That's what I would want to pour out. But does that seem to be what's most important to Joseph here? Those are important things, but they're not the most important. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, but after them there will arise 7 years of famine. And all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown by the land by reason of the famine that will follow. For it will be very severe. The doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by God. And God will shortly bring it about. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years. Let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities. Let them keep it. That food shall be reserved for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. Now, he's very specific about what he sees, and he's got a plan in mind. But the thing that's striking to me is he's not giving a recitation of, and stay tuned for the news at 10. And there's a bad weather report coming in 7 years. What he's describing to Pharaoh is, this is what God is going to do. And you would be a wise man to see it and get on board with it. He's not in that sort of funk of, we can get. This says, whatever. Whatever. It's an attitude that reflects something of who God is. Now, this fourth thing about building. God builds in us while we build. There's really 2 kinds of building going on. We are building a marriage or relationships with our kids or reputation or trust or goodwill or our work or our health, a lot of good things, or ministry. But at the same time, God is building. Now, what has Joseph built so far? He's built character. He's built trustworthiness. 2 men, where he's been a servant and a prisoner, have both entrusted virtually all of the running of the house and the prison to him. It's remarkable. He's built a work ethic. He's built his reputation. Somebody that you can rely on. But at the same time, Joseph is building that into his life. God is building something also into Joseph. How does that building take place? Oftentimes, it takes place just like with Joseph, through the dark night of the soul. I think sometimes God's work in our lives involves something like a shovel, where we have our life is sort of like a house, and we would just like to live in our house, but God says, no, I've got some work I want to do on this house, and he pulls out a shovel. He's determined to build a basement in our house. He's going to build some depth in our life. He's going to bring out the jackhammer sometimes and jack up that concrete foundation we thought was pretty secure. We don't need a basement. I don't need something else. I don't need to be deepened. But God seems to think, so as we get a jackhammer, I don't like jackhammers. I don't like it when it feels like I'm being jackhammered by God or somebody else. Or God's shovel of digging out more dirt. This hole's got to go deeper if we're going to put a basement in here. Sometimes I think God's tools are sandpaper or sandblasting. And on the outside of the house, that brick finish that I thought I liked. No, we need the original thing on there. Sand blasting away at this thing. Dust, sand flying up everywhere. I don't like that in my life. Or Jesus talked about pruning. I've got some rose bushes. I've pruned one. I have a few more to do. Pruning in Southern California, the rose bushes, means you take those things down to about a foot or two above the ground. It looks like you've destroyed this thing. Destroyed. That's what it appears to us. God, I can't take any more of this. What are you doing? Why are you allowing this to happen? Because in those dark nights of the soul, there are things that God is building into us that just don't get built any other way. God builds in us while we build. The last thing I want to mention, number 5, God builds life lessons in us. God builds life lessons in us. One of the things that's interesting to me about this is that the atheist, ungodly Pharaoh decides to change Joseph's name. And he changed it to some Egyptian name. The English translation is a God who speaks and lives. A God who speaks and lives. Now, if you're Joseph, and Pharaoh, the king of the world at that point, gives you that name, what has he understood? That he's never understood before. You know, there is something in this God thing. I know a guy where God speaks and God lives. One of the most intriguing things to me about today's stories that we're looking at is the last thing we're going to look at here. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bore them to him. By now he's about 30 years old. He's got about 13 years in the bank in dark night of the soul, where for all these years it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. How did he make it through there? We get 2 sneak previews into what struck him and what allowed him to keep going. The first one. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. The word Manasseh is close to the Hebrew word forget. For 13 years he'd been through this, and he names his firstborn son Manasseh. Every time it's time to eat, he says, Manasseh! He reminds himself, forget. God has made me forget. Now, what has God made him forget? Well, he mentions 2 things there at the end of that verse. All my hardship and all my father's house. Now, what is he saying here? Is he saying that somehow God was able to give me amnesia? And for the life of me, I can't remember being thrown down a pit by my brothers. And I can't remember being falsely accused of rape. And I can't remember those awful years in the dungeon, the pit. Well, he's not saying amnesia. Not saying that. What is he saying? 2 things. He's saying, I forget all my hardship, the pain, and all my father's house. I think he's saying here is what he's forgotten is his pain and his longings. The things he wished he had happened, that it could have occurred. Growing up with his father, raising a family in the promised land, having good relationships with his brothers, marrying and growing up and having kids there. Now, he didn't really forget those things. I think what he's saying is this. Whereas before, my hardships and what I wanted my life to be, pain and longings, were first things. They were first things. I didn't know it at the time, not until they were taken away from me. and not until I experienced pain. They were first things, primary things, things that are most important to me. And I think what he's saying here is, in the dark night of the soul, there's a shift that took place. Things that used to be to me first things became second things. There's something else that's the first thing. I'm going to reflect God in my daily activity, whether I'm by myself serving or whether I'm with people. That's the first thing. I'm going to reflect the wonder of God who hasn't abandoned me and still loves me even through these dark nights. That's the first thing. And the pain that he's been through and the things that he's lost that he wished he could have had, they're good things. These are good things, but they're not first things in his heart. They're second things. That's Manasseh. The Lord has made me forget. A shift. Second, the name of the second child he called Ephraim. For God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. The word Ephraim sounds like the Hebrew word fruitful, but it's actually the word that means doubly fruitful. Now, he had an idea early in his life what fruitful would have been. I want to get married. I want to have kids here in the promised land. I want to be around my family, my father, my mother, my siblings. I want to live my life here with my people. That's what it meant to, that's what I should have had. That's what it would have been fruitful. And all of that fruitfulness was taken away. Gone. But instead, God gave him a whole different set of fruitfulness that he says is double. Double. Every time he calls Ephraim, hey Ephraim, it's time for breakfast, get up. Fruitful. Ephraim, it's time for lunch, come on, let's go eat. Come on, buddy. Fruitful. Forget Manasseh. Fruitful. Ephraim. Building. The first 7 years of our church, when we moved here in 1985, we started in 1986, Easter of 86. We met at the Deerfield Boys and Girls Club. We were there for about a year and a half. We met at, you remember these days? You remember then we went to the Boys and Girls Club. We survived that for about 6 years or so. Then we were off to the old senior center down in University Park, and we were there about a year and a half. 10 years altogether, and then the church that built this building wanted us to see if we wanted to sublet from them. We came over here and we were like, wow. We've been out there for 10 years, every week setting up, tearing down. Now, starting a church from scratch was much harder than I ever imagined. And after everybody left for those first 7 years, and we got everything outside, locked up, everybody got in the car, they took off, went up for lunch. Every Sunday for 7 years, I would go out in the parking lot and sit on the hood of my car. And except for 5 Sundays out of 7 years, it's about 360 Sundays. Except for 5, I sat on the hood of my car and said, God, I just don't think I have what it takes to do this. Somebody else could, probably. I just don't think I can do it. I don't have the ability. I don't have the character. I don't have the strength. Too easily discouraged. Just want to throw in the towel. Every week. And I go home, sulk at home, cry to Mindy on her shoulder, sort of metaphorically. Get up Monday morning, discouraged like most pastors, and go into work. I used to take Monday off, but I decided that was stupid to take Monday off because I was still sulking, and I didn't want to be sulking on my day off. I'll never forget this particular Sunday. It had been almost exactly 7 years. I sat in the car and I started to go through, God, I just don't think I have what it takes to do this. I just don't know if this plane is ever going to get off the ground, if it can fly. And I remember having a thought. I suddenly realized, God, you're going to do this, aren't you? And there was something in me that said, yes, he will. This is what building looks like. This is what it feels like. Through disappointments and discouragements, through trials, through wondering, how can I keep going on? Do I have what it takes? You get up the next day and you say, what can I build today? I'm going to be a builder. And whatever's in front of me, I want to build something now. Let's pray together. Father, I know a lot of folks that are hearing this are really in some deep waters, in the swamp. And it is hard. It's discouraging. It's demoralizing. You feel like you've just lost all perspective. We look at our circumstances and we look at how we feel, and we, without hardly even knowing we're doing it, we take those as our barometers. And we draw conclusions that sink us deeper into our hole, into our dark night. Father, all through the dark night for Joseph, you were there, no matter how it seemed on any given day, or no matter how he felt on any given day, or no matter what wasn't happening that he thought should have been going on, you were still there. Building something into him and wanting him to turn to you as his only and deepest resource. To build a relationship of trust based on the fact of your existence and your presence. That you are telling a story through his life, no matter how dark some of the chapters may look. Father, today would you give us those eyes to see. Give us the right measuring sticks to look at, the promises of God. And help us to plant ourselves on those instead of the miry swamp of our circumstances and our feelings. Holy Spirit, would you come sweep through this room. Lift up the hearts of the people and the eyes to yourself. Help us to see that you long for us. That maybe you hurt more than we do about the dark nights that we're in. And that it grieves you more than it grieves us. But that it must be done. Take us by the hand even when we've given up. Take us ahead today. Engage us and help us to engage with the life in front of us.